Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, today 5C Lending Partners Corp. CLPC just filed an annual report on a shareholder vote, and I am seeing some interesting outcomes. Quick note, this is not financial advice, just my take on public filings for educational purposes. The company had its annual meeting and voted on key leadership and business changes, and the results are pretty clear-cut across the board. So 5C Lending Partners Corp recently held its annual shareholder meeting on the 16th of June 2026. This is where the folks who own pieces of the company, the stockholders, get together to vote on important stuff. Imagine it as a yearly check in to make sure the company is heading in the right direction. A big chunk of the company's stock, about 74.4%, was represented at this meeting. That means a lot of owners either showed up in person or gave their voting power to someone else, called a proxy. This shows a pretty good level of shareholder engagement, which is usually a positive sign. They voted on shares of their common stock and a small amount of preferred stock. One of the main events at any shareholder meeting is the election of directors. These are the people who oversee the company's strategy and make big decisions. At this meeting, they were voting to elect Class 2 directors. Think of directors as the guardians of the company, making sure it is run well and in the best interest of everyone. First up, Robert Gheewalla was up for election as a director. Now, looking at the votes, it is a bit unusual. Mr. Gheewalla received only 515 votes in favour. This is a very small number considering the total shares represented at the meeting typically. Directors get votes in the millions. This could suggest a few things, perhaps a very specific voting group, or maybe a symbolic vote for a particular class of shares that did not have a large presence. It is definitely something to keep an eye on. Then we have Michael Coaster. He was also up for election as a Class 2 director, and here is where we see a much more typical voting result. Mr. Coaster received a massive 701-843 votes in favour. This indicates strong support from the shareholders for his continued role on the board. He will be serving until 2029, which is a pretty long tenure, suggesting confidence in his leadership. Another crucial vote is the ratification of the company's independent auditor. This is basically shareholder approval of the accounting firm that checks the company's financial books to make sure everything is accurate. It is like the company's financial doctor. In this case, the shareholders overwhelmingly ratified the appointment of Deloitte and Touch LLP, an accounting giant, as their auditor for 2026. And look at this, a perfect score, 8,921,874 votes in favour, with 0 against, 0 abstaining, and 0 broken non-votes. This means every single share represented at the meeting voted to approve Deloitte and Touch LLP. This shows a huge amount of trust in the auditors and suggests a clean bill of financial health from the perspective of the shareholders who voted. Now here is a really interesting one. The shareholders voted on and approved an amendment to the company's charter. The charter is like the company's rulebook. This specific amendment is about changing the voting requirement needed to approve a liquidation proposal. A liquidation is essentially when a company decides to sell off all its assets and close down. And again, a unanimous decision. All 8,921,874 shares voted in favour of this charter amendment. What this likely means is that the company's leadership wants to make it easier to wind down the company if necessary. With a unanimous vote, it signals that the shareholders are comfortable with potentially lowering the threshold for a liquidation. This could be a strategic move for flexibility in the future, allowing for a quicker decision if circumstances require it. It is not necessarily a sign of impending doom, but rather a proactive adjustment to their foundational rules. Looking at the overall picture here, 5C Lending Partners Corp had a very decisive annual meeting. The election of Michael Coaster, the ratification of Deloitte and Touch LLP, and the amendment to the company's charter all received overwhelming support. The only slightly peculiar result was the vote for Robert Gheewalla, which was remarkably low. It does not seem to have impacted his election given the total shares present, but it is certainly a data point that makes you wonder about the specifics of that particular vote. The unanimous approval for the auditor and the charter amendment indicates a high degree of alignment between the company's management and its shareholders on key governance and operational matters. They are essentially saying yes to the path forward proposed by leadership. The risk I am watching is just the clarity around the voting for Robert Gheewalla. While he was elected, the low vote count is unusual and could hint at underlying disagreements or specific class voting dynamics that are not fully transparent in this report. What I am actually looking for is how these decisions play out operationally in the coming year. Oh, and the research tools I actually use are linked in the description. They help keep this channel going. That is my take. Stay decoded. If you found this analysis helpful, please like this video, subscribe for more, and join our Discord community linked below.